Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Fiber Strike 95, and today we're back here with another game day flight. This here's our game day flight of January 9th, 2026. And today we're here to cover a pretty important matchup here today. We're going to visit the biggest matchup for today and this weekend, and that is the Peach Bowl today. We're here in Bloomington, Indiana, here today at Monroe County Airport, and we're here to fly. We're going to fly Kurtz and Getty down to Atlanta for the upcoming Peach Bowl. The reason that we picked this matchup today is because the winner of this is just one step closer to winning their program's first ever national championship. So I hope you guys are having a good week so far and planning for a really fun weekend. So we got some really cool stuff going on here today. So I hope you're all having a great day. And I can't wait for the weekend to get started myself. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat. Red Baron, good to see you, my dude. I hope you're doing well, Red Baron Flies. I hope you're having a great week. So here's a shout for your channel. Follow his channel. He does a lot of general aviation stuff, and he's around my local area. So check out our local streamer that I know very well and a great friend of the community. So our flight plan is going to be this. So this is our flight plan for this afternoon stream. And yes, we're doing a bit of something a little different for this stream. And we're going to fly from Monroe County. We're going to fly up to we're going to actually be taking the Vision Jet today. So we're going to go to 31,000 feet, and we'll make our way over to Fulton County Airport. I could have done this with general aviation too, but I wanted to do something a little different for today. I hope you guys understand. So we'll do a flight, fly over a bit of Nashville, and make our way down to Atlanta Fulton County Airport, since it is technically the closest airport to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. So that's why we picked Fulton County. But that is what we're going to do. Oh, really? Thank you for letting me know. I guess I could have probably put that. I'm still trying to get everything set up on this PC, so yeah. Of course, we're taking the Vision Jet today, since the Vision Jet is perfect. It's, of course, in the red and white, just like Indiana Hoosiers. Hoosiers! Indiana football. Yep, got pretty good. Cirrus Vision Jet is GA, so it fits. So it's basically your personal mini business jet. It's your own personal business jet. That's why I wanted to take it today. It's not super fast, which makes this perfect for this type of trip. So we're gonna go ahead and get this Vision Jet started. I'm gonna go ahead and get this fuel. I'm gonna put it to 75% fuel. Immediately. Let's go look for checklist. Haven't started this thing in a while. I removed the chocks, the engine covers. We're gonna get the strobe lights on. So we're getting everything on. We're going to get this on to on. So we'll monitor all that. So we're going to go ahead and get this flight plan set up. Thankfully, the flight plan should be pretty simple. KBMG. KFTY. Procedures. Departure. There really isn't much departure. However, there is an arrival. We can take the arrival approach. Runway 26. Load. And then I'm going to load the approach, which is going to be, according to this, I took the RNAV 26. Yes. And I'm going to go with a K-Bear. And I'm going to load this. Bingo. There you go. So that's our flight plan. Okay. There we go. So everything is started. Going to parachute to the stadium? Oh, that's a funny one, Red Baron. No. We're not going to we're not going to do that. So we're going to go ahead. Heading bug. Set. I'm gonna go ahead and do some BNAV stuff. BNAV. So we're going to cruise at 31,000 feet. So we're going to go to flight level 310. So we're going to go ahead and release the parking brake, and we're going to the runway heading, by the way, we're going to go ahead and hit our runway. We're going to heading 246. So we're going to go ahead and taxi down. So we're going to go cruise our way over to runway 24. So here's the route for today. So we're going to go ahead and put on our slideshow, of course. So let's just set this up. Gotta keep pressing it forward. So I guess I gotta keep moving this forward. So we're gonna go ahead and runway 24. If you guys want to join alongside us, we're in the Southeast Asia server. And our recommendation here is to take an aircraft that goes around 250 to 300 knots of airspeed. So we're going to be climbing up. So here we go, guys. We're just about to make the runway. I'm going to set the trim. We're going to go ahead and set the heading in the VNAV. Get everything set up here. So we've got everything set up. So let's go ahead and get going. Up, and away we go. And we're up. Beautiful. We're going to go ahead and set autopilot. We're going to gear up. And we're officially off here from Indiana. So we just left Bloomington. now going to go ahead and change our heading. We're going to put on the auto throttle. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and set the, there we go. So there we go, guys. We're officially off. We're heading our way to Atlanta. So we're officially climbing out of here. We're going to make our way over to Fulton County Airport soon enough. So we're officially climbing, guys. So we'll head 31,000 feet sooner than later. So we're going to be climbing to 31,000 feet. So the flight time for here from Bloomington to Fulton County should take us about 1 hour and 44 minutes. So we should be getting up to 31,000 feet. So we should be climbing here very, very soon. So very excited for this one. There wasn't too many great games this week, but this was definitely the biggest one since this is the college football playoff semifinal today, and the other one there wasn't really any big major matchups I wanted to cover this weekend. So this one was definitely a pretty easy choice for what I wanted to do this weekend, of course. So we're going to be going to talk about the Peach Bowl. We're going to be climbing up here. So for our Peach Bowl matchup, I do want to cover some of our slides. So this is the Peach Bowl today, the subject of today's matchup. This annual college bowl game has been around since December 30th, 1968. They've currently been playing their games originally at Grant Field at the Georgia Tech campus, which is now Bobby Dodd Stadium. Of course, between 1971 and 1992, they've now been playing games at the Georgia Dome, and then they now moved it to the brand new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which they are playing nowadays. From the beginning, the Peach Bowl often featured teams from the Atlantic Coast Conference, and from the Southeastern Conference has always been between these two conferences for college football. Then between 1993 to 2013, the ACC and SEC established the official tie-ins with the bowl game. Of course, with the expansion of the college football playoff, the Peach Bowl is now serves as either a quarterfinal or semifinal each season. And in the case of this season, it is the playoff semifinals. And this game will be played a week after the New Year's Day, of course. So this is the Peach Bowl. So, pretty important stadium, of course, and it's a pretty big bowl game, of course. Used to be historically been a minor bowl game. It was one of the big New Year's Six bowl games that used to be there back in the older days, but now it's a playoff game. So pretty important bowl game, of course. So I'm going to talk to you about the brief history of the Peach Bowl. Of course, there's a brief history about it. The Peach Bowl was approved by the NCAA on May 1st, 1968, and it was served as a fundraiser for the Georgia Lighthouse for the Blind Foundation, a project of the Lions Clubs of Georgia, which are basically international service organizations, and the creation is credited to their club member George Pierre Crumbly Jr., known as the father of the Peach Bowl. And he was the one who shepherded through the certification. And while many people believe that the Peach Bowl has been described as the first nation's first charity bowl, it was predated by other games, including most notably the Pythian Bowl that lasted between 1941 to 1951. Of course, following years of lackluster attendance, the Peach Bowl was then taken over by the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce. Of course, seven of the first 10 means pitted an ACC conference opponent or Atlantic Coast Conference against an at-large opponent. The Bowl had no automatic berths prior to 1993, but usually featured an ACC team or a team from the Southeastern Conference, the SEC. Of course, from 1993 until 2013, the game matched an SEC team versus one from the ACC. Of course, from 1993 to 2005, it was always either the third selection for the ACC against the fourth from the SEC. However, also from 2006 onwards, as well, the Peach Bowl always got the fifth overall selection for the SEC. If the BCS took two SEC schools every year, the Chick-fil-A ended up with the sixth pick at the conference. Of course, the Peach Bowl was then ascended to major bowl status, starting for the 2014 season, assuring it would feature major conference champions or runner-up. Of course, the Peach Bowl has donated more than $32 million in charity since 2016. So that's just the brief history of the Peach Bowl, of the bowl game itself. So that is just a brief history of how this bowl game came to be. So pretty big important thing to know about, of course. So pretty big stuff going on today, of course. Last night, by the way, for some major sports stuff. Now, a result relevant to all this, of course, has been the college football playoff semifinal. The other semifinal yesterday. Yesterday was the other big playoff semifinal. It was Miami and Ole Miss in the. It was Miami and Ole Miss. That was a really great matchup. But in the end, it's Miami moving on to the national championship game, which is actually pretty insane to think about. But yes, Miami into the national championship, which is really huge for the Miami Hurricane program. Because they won the Fiesta Bowl. That was what it was. But it was a huge, huge game, and Miami continued to surprise everyone this year. They came out of nowhere. 13-2, they didn't even make it to the conference title game, sadly. But man, Miami proved everyone wrong. They had an unbelievable road to the national championship. They beat Ole Miss, and they also beat a really good Texas A&M team in the first round, knocked out Texas A&M, and then they stunned Ohio State. They've had an unbelievable run to the national championship, and who knows? And they're also hosting the national championship on their home turf, which could give Miami a potentially huge advantage in the national championship, playing at their home turf at Hard Rock Stadium. So this should be absolutely insane. Sadly, of course, I'll be gone when that happens because I would have loved to do the national championship game, but that's why we're doing the Peach Bowl here today, because this was the most significant matchup, of course. But huge win for Miami, a massive win. If they were to win the national championship, it would be the program's sixth national title, by the way. It would be their program's sixth national title and their first since 2001. Which, by the way, the last time they won the national title, that Miami team was possibly the greatest college football team ever. So a national title at Cristobal would be absolutely huge for that Miami football program. So that's big, big deal. So that's why I say that's why the playoff could be good, because that team, no one expected them to. And the thing that surprised me most about Miami has been, for the most part, it's been their defense that's been a big part of why they've been doing so well. And even though defensively they weren't super great against Ole Miss, they did just enough to win that game. So big, big, big W for Miami football. So, big win for University of Miami football. Really cool stuff about college football, of course. Some huge. And it's now hosted many more stuff too. So big stuff going on here, of course. So in terms of other events this week, by the way, for our big sports series, of course, we got some other big games this weekend. Of course, we have Frankfurt and Dortmund for the German Bundesliga today. That should be a pretty interesting one. We also have a couple of FA Cup matchups this weekend. The most notable ones in the English FA Cup is, of course, Everton and Sunderland. That was between two Premier League teams. Newcastle, Bournemouth should be an interesting one. And Tottenham and Aston Villa. Those are some of the big FA Cup games in England for the big English domestic cups. In Italy, the big matchup on Saturday, of course, is Roma versus Sassuolo. In Spain, of course, this weekend is most notably known for of course Villarreal Alaves. And then Sunday is the big Super Cup final in Saudi Arabia, Barcelona and Real Madrid. But of course, that Super Cup isn't worth much. But the big matchup, though, is what would have been the second game, Inter versus Napoli. The top two in the Italian league going against each other. So, some pretty interesting games, but I think the Peach Bowl is definitely a much bigger matchup this week. So here we are, guys. We're flying our way over to the Peach Bowl, of course. Could have I done this with a normal GA, like a traditional prop? Sure, but I wanted to do something a little different for today's game day flight. So pretty big stuff, of course. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about So we're going to go cover more about the Peach Bowl as we're going up. So here's some of the most notable games of the Peach Bowl, of course. The Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. The 1974 edition of the Peach Bowl was pretty notable. It's the only Peach Bowl to ever end in a tie game. Yes, a tie. And it was between Texas Tech and Vanderbilt, who were each limited to 2 field goals in a 6-6 tie. However, this happened before the NCAA ever used the overtime rules. So yes, it ended in a bloody tie. And of course, in American football, nothing is worse in American football than ending up in a tie. No one wants to have that. No one does. The next one, of course, was the 1976 version, which is not in the notes, but was the first and only shutout in the bowl game's history, as the Kentucky Wildcats held North Carolina scoreless 21-0. One of the biggest games of it was the 2005 edition, which was the first Peach Bowl to feature 2 teams that were ranked in the top 10. LSU and Miami, of course. However, unfortunately, that game was never close, because guess who dominated that game? LSU did. They absolutely destroyed Miami 40-3. 40-3. As the Tigers completely dismantled them. Absolute dismantlement. By the way, too, funnily enough, about that LSU Tigers team, they had Jamarcus Russell as their quarterback, who is the biggest draft bust in NFL history, along with Andrew Whitworth, Joseph Adai, Dwayne Bowe, and more. So that was pretty notable. The 2007 edition was the first Peach Bowl to use overtime, which Auburn was able to win that game over Clemson 23-20. The 2017 matchup, the big one we see here, it was a pretty huge one, of course. UCF versus Auburn. And UCF at the time was undefeated. So, and Auburn had won against both national championship contenders, Georgia and Alabama. And this was a big game, of course. And guess who won that game? UCF won that game, actually. 34-27. This was a big deal because UCF was the only undefeated team in the FBS that year. As such, UCF was selected as the 2017 national championship by one recognized selector. Thus, as a result, UCF claims to have a share of a national championship. Yes, yes, UCF can claim the 2017 national championship. Pretty funny, of course. The 2 more editions, of course, that were listed was in 2019. LSU scored 63 points in their Peach Bowl domination as they crushed Oklahoma 63-28 en route to a national championship for the Tigers. And of course, the second Peach Bowl to require overtime was the 2025 last season, as Texas defeated Arizona State 39-31. Punching a big win for the Texas Longhorns. Unfortunately for the Longhorns, of course, they got knocked out in the next round by a really strong Ohio State team. So that covers our news, and that basically covers the history of notable games of the Peach Bowl. Our last slide of the normal Peach Bowl slides is where we're going to be playing here today, tonight. The Mercedes-Benz Stadium that was opened back in 2017. It's the replacement of the Georgia Dome. That was opened in 1992, but of course the Georgia Dome's facilities are just not up to the modern standards. It was built during an awkward time in stadium development. But this beautiful stadium, by the way, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is home to not only the Atlanta Falcons, but it's also home to Atlanta United FC of the MLS and the upcoming expansion team of the National Women's Soccer League. It's owned by the state of Georgia through the Georgia World Congress Center Authority. and operated by the A&B Group, which are the parent organization of the Falcons. The total cost of this construction was 1.6 billion US dollars. Yes, it's quite an expensive stadium to build. And speaking of which, great, another bot. There, stupid bot. Ever since its opening, many more events formerly held at the Georgia Dome moved here, including the SEC Championship, the Peach Bowl, and the College Football Playoff National Championship, which it hosted last year. But other events include the MLS Cup and Super Bowl 53. And will host its next Super Bowl, Super Bowl 50. It's Super Bowl 62 in 2028. And it will also host multiple matches of this year's upcoming FIFA World Cup. The unique feature of this stadium, of course, is its retractable roof, which features a pinwheel of 8 translucent triangular panels, and the roof was inspired by that of the Roman Pantheon. Of course, was the roof. And below the roof is a halo, which is the scoreboard, by the way, which is a 58 by 1,000 foot ring-shaped video board and covers an area of 62,000 square feet. It's 3 times large as the current single largest display board in the NFL at the time. But it's a really fancy stadium, of course. It's an absolutely gorgeous stadium, of course. It's also got a huge, oversized locker rooms for college players, and it has really state-of-the-art facilities, of course. But it's hosted many events. Its current capacity is 71,000 people at the stadium, but it can expand up to 75,000 people, which is, in the record attendance of this was 79,000 for the 2022 Peach Bowl. So, yeah, there's a lot of people going into the stadium. Hey, Sir Dev, good to see you. Good afternoon, my dude. I hope you're doing well. We're doing the Peach Bowl today. We're in the Vision Jet. We're flying from Bloomington, Indiana, over to Atlanta. The Peach Bowl is going to be played, so we're going to fly Kurt Singetti over from Bloomington over to Fulton County. So that's what we're doing here today. So we're 31,000 feet. Of course, there's a significant wind here today. At 31,000 feet, we have significant wind. We have a bit of a 121 knot crosswind here today. Our Vision Jet's doing all right. We're about 240 knots. We're just 294 nautical miles away from our final stop here. In Fulton County, so we have quite a bit of flying left to go here. So. So we're going to continue up here today. So Big O Peach Bowl, Indiana, Oregon today. The winner of this is one step closer to winning their club program's first national championship. So let's talk first about the Oregon Ducks, shall we? Since we're up here 30,000 feet, of course. We're going to talk about a bit about Oregon football. This is Flights with Joel's program, the Oregon Ducks. They played Eugene, Oregon. They've been around since 1893. They play in the Big Ten Conference. Yes, both Indiana and Oregon play in the same conference. What they do. Even though they're now known as the Ducks, they were commonly known as the Webfoots until the 1960s, of course. Oregon plays its game at the intimate but very passionate Autzen Stadium in Eugene, which is only 54,000 people. However, during the 2000s, since the 2000s, Oregon has been one of the most successful programs in college football. And of course, you all probably know Oregon football in most recent years for their creative uniforms, helmets, and logo designs. It's thanks to their close partnership with Nike, which was also founded in the same city of Eugene by then student Phil Knight and his track coach Bill Bowerman. Oregon football has quite the interesting history, you see. Oregon football, prior to the 21st century, Oregon wasn't really the most successful program. Oregon has had several important bowl games, of course, but it wasn't until the Rich Brooks era that Oregon started to actually had its stability in the 1980s. But it was really the biggest moment for that was the game against Washington in 1994, when he took the Duck to the Rose Bowl, during the interception against the 9th-ranked Huskies, which helped them lead to the Rose Bowl of that year. Unfortunately, they lost to Penn State, but it was the beginning of things to come for the Oregon Ducks. And of course, ever since the 2000s with Mike Belletti, Oregon's continued to go up and up and up. So, currently their head coach now is Dan Lanning. In his 4th season, he's been absolutely incredible for the Ducks, 48-7. Their all-time win percentage, by the way, all-time record 732 wins, 513 losses, and 46 ties, which is 58% of their games, which is pretty crazy to think about it. For the Ducks, of course. One of the most successful programs to have never won a national title. So one notable thing, of course, is their championships. They've never won a national championship. They're one of the most successful programs to have never won a national title. They will include at least a share of 16 conference titles. Their first conference title was the Oregon Intercollegiate Football Association under Percy Benson. Of course, they won several Pacific Coast Conference titles, starting from 1916 with the Webfoots. Some of these were co-championships. In fact, all those times they won the Pacific Coast, they were co-conference championship. They didn't win their first outright conference championship until 1994. And that was with Rich Brooks in his final season, by the way. But then they've won several more conference championships, especially during the late 2000s and early 2010s. Have been incredibly successful program with several really successful coaches during their time with the Ducks. Mike Belletti, Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich, Mario Cristobal, and most recently, Dean Lanning. They've also won a couple of conference titles, of course. They won a couple of division championships during the Pac-12. They've been incredibly successful, of course. But of course, I think this could very well be the best Oregon team we have seen in a long time. Lots of great players for the Ducks. So, of course, Oregon football, as you guys may not be aware of it, of course, has had several important rivalries. Of course, you have their local in-state rivalry with Oregon State. It's known as the Civil War, but it's played just about annually ever since 1894, 132 years ago. and it's the 5th most played college football rivalry game in the FBS. Of course, these two programs are not very far away from each other. They're less than 50 miles from each other in the Willamette Valley, and has played continuously since 1945. Of course, Oregon has historically dominated this series, 68 to 49 and 10. It's now 70, 49 and 10 all time for the Ducks. The Ducks once had a win streak of 8, which is their longest win streak. Oregon State also won 8 straight as well at one point. However, since the collapse of the Pac-12, however, this rivalry, these two no longer share a conference. Of course, this led to Washington replacing the Beavers as their main opponent in the end of the year. However, thankfully, the good news is the rivalry is still going to continue. That's because just recently, of course, in September 2025, the rivalry is going to continue for 6 more games starting in 2027 after a year break hiatus. And who knows, this rivalry could still very well continue. But this rivalry is definitely a pretty big one, though, between the Ducks and Beavers. Pretty heated one, but it's and they mainly play for the Platypus Trophy. Yes, it's a platypus because it features the platypus, which has the features of both a duck and a beaver. So that's why they put the Platypus Trophy. Now, if you ask most Oregon fans if you want to know their most bitter rivalry, it's with Washington. And again, this was another rivalry that's been played for over 100 years, since 1900. And of course, there's lots of poor behavior from both fans. Of course, Washington has historically dominated this series. Nowadays, Oregon has been much more successful against the Huskies, including a win streak from 2004 to 2015. Washington's won 5 of the last 9 games, and as of 2024, Washington leads the series 63 to 49 and 5. But Oregon-Washington is one of the more bitter rivalries, especially in the West Coast. And the last one I wanted to mention is a couple other ones. Some other rivalries include Stanford, which was really big during the 2010s. And USC was another big one too. But their biggest ones are these 2 games. Thank you, Suradev. I appreciate it. Suradev, no worries. I definitely appreciate your help. Thank you. You got too many bots in this place, of course. I'm going to reset this back to 2000, of course, for the VNAV to take. But this was pretty big, though, too. So after the Ducks, of course, they play at the Autzen Stadium. This is the home of the Ducks. Autzen Stadium is the proud home of Oregon football. But this stadium is really unique in a way. It's been around their home since 1967. Of course, the stadium's gone through several expansions since then. Officially, the seating capacity is between 54 to 60,000. However, regular attendance exceeds that figure. And yes, this is actually a pretty small stadium in the Big Ten. Speaking of which, this is actually a pretty small stadium in the conference. In fact, if you ask the football facilities, Oregon's actually one of the smaller stadiums in the Big Ten. They're actually the 6th smallest stadium in the conference. I mean, they're right around between Indiana and Illinois in capacity, of course. So they got a pretty small stadium, but that's not the reason why Autzen's so feared. The reason why Autzen is incredibly feared, of course, is its atmosphere. This is a very loud stadium. for its crowd noise, and it's thanks to the stadium's small footprint. Fans are very close to the action, and the field is sunken. These contribute to the loudness of the stadium, even though it's smaller than other noise-comparable stadiums. In fact, according to many of the Pac-12, from Oregon's resurgence to 2002, Autzen may have been even louder due to the noise reverberating all up down the stadium. One particular game was, of course, in 2007. Fans were recorded at 127.2 decibels in a big upset win against USC. They said it was loud. And one person said it was loud. It made the big house look like a whimper. It was among the last places they've ever been to it. And a lot of our people kind of agree with it. It's probably per person is the loudest stadium in college football. It's a very tough place to play. Like I said, that's why size doesn't always matter in Austin Stadium. It's just a very loud place. There's also some really cool traditions here. Of course, since 1990, Dan Essig, the PA announcer, has said it never rains in Austin Stadium before each home game. Of course, the team takes the field by a motorcycle with the Oregon Duck riding the strains of Mighty Oregon. And of course, it's been featured a lot in College Gameday. In fact, they made overall 13 visits to Autzen Stadium. More than any other school appeared from a period 2009-2014, more than any other school. So, yeah, it's a very popular stadium. It's even hosted an International Champions Cup in 2016. So this stadium is really special. Very special stadium. It's very, very nice, of course. A lot of people know Oregon for their flashy and colorful uniforms, of course. It's not really surprised Oregon football is known for its flashy, colorful uniforms. Consisting of multiple color combinations of helmets, uniforms, socks, and shoes. Both shirts and pants, by the way, resulting in basically a new uniform setup every single week. And that's not even counting the in-season changes to the uniforms themselves. And the changes have been often well-liked and praised by football recruits. And that's why Oregon's had such great success with recruiting people over the years. The new uniform schemes were color coordinated by Oregon alum Tinker Hatfield, an executive of Nike. And they've had the Ducks outfitting rights since 1995. However, prior to all this stuff with Nike, of course, Oregon's uniforms were quite traditional at the time, featuring a yellow helmet with the interlocking UO emblem and yellow pants, joined with a green home jersey with gold letters or white road jersey with green letters and shoulder loops. So, quite traditional. They used to be much more traditional, but of course, the big era where that changed was in 1999. Where Oregon, with the new Nike design gear, featured the redesigned Oregon emblem. And as a result, that began Oregon's non-traditional, non-uniform standards. And it's still here today. Of course, there was some controversy, but it makes Oregon very unique, though, its uniforms. But it's very flashy, of course. The one you see here in the picture, by the way, they actually made the uniforms look like an actual duck. With the white head, the green uniform, of course, it's the Ducks, the green yellow, white pants, and orange socks and shoes. So yes, it actually looks like a duck. Outside of the green, it practically looks like a duck. But yes, Oregon has some really flashy uniforms. Very, very flashy. But yeah, they wear a lot of really unique uniforms, of course. And I mean, they've had so many combinations. At one point, They actually have over 100 official combinations of uniforms and 8 to 12 unique sets per season. So they have so many freaking uniforms. It's oh boy. Like I said, it's a huge part of their identity, of course, their flashiness. Of course, the Ducks have had several with the ICAO code of our destination. KBMG-KFTY. Here we go. Kilo Foxtrot Tango Yankee. Fulton County Airport. So, of course, the Ducks have had several important players over the years. Of course, the most notable Oregon Duck here mentioned is their only Heisman Trophy winner and their most successful player in the program's history, Marcus Mariota, who won a Heisman Trophy in 2014. And he's had an incredible college career with the Ducks, of course. Becoming the first and still the only Oregon Duck to have won a Heisman Trophy, of course. And he played the Ducks into an incredibly successful year, and he even took them to the Rose Bowl, of course, in the College Football Playoff. And of course, he ended up battling Ohio State in the national championship. Unfortunately, he lost that game 42-20, but he still has been their most successful player. Of course, in terms of the pros, there's actually been Oregon Ducks who have done really well in the pro game. One of which is Norv Van Brocklin, who spent 4 seasons in Oregon before playing for the Rams and Eagles from the 1940s to 1960. And he's been one of the greatest quarterbacks of his era. The Dutchman, including winning an MVP in 1960, and at one point he even had one of the greatest NFL performances of all time. He once set an NFL record 554 yards in a game in 1951, mind you, when defense used to be so dominant. And here's the thing, that record is still standing even today. Then, of course, you have probably the greatest Oregon Duck to play in the pros, Dan Fouts. And he's the legendary Chargers quarterback at the 70s and 80s. Dan Fouts, an absolute legend. He's definitely one of the greatest modern Ducks. Then you have safety Mel Renfro of the Cowboys from the 60s and 70s. The star safety of America's team during that time. Then you have Dave Wilcox, the big linebacker from the 49ers from the 60s and 70s. Been a 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro. And then you have offensive lineman Gary Zimmerman, who was the offensive lineman for the Vikings and Broncos during his time in the league. But yes, basically I've mentioned 5 of the 6 Oregon players that have been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And those have been those Hall of Famers. Now, of course, there have been some amazing All-Pros. I have Haloti Ngata, a star defensive tackle for the Ducks, and he ended up having a great NFL career. 5-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. He won a Super Bowl for the Ravens at Super Bowl 47. Definitely a great player for out of Oregon. You also have Bo Nix, who's now the current quarterback of the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos now have the #1 seed in the AFC. So should be interesting to see what Bo Nix's future lies ahead of him. Then you have Michael James, who was an absolute stud during his college days as a running back. He once won the Doak Walker Award, which is the top running back in the country. And there are many more other Oregon Ducks out there, but these are just some of the most notable ones that we know. So that's about covers a bit about Oregon football. The Ducks, of course. Everyone knows about Oregon football. It's not surprising that the Ducks have always been a very successful program, especially during the 21st century. So, of course, guys, for our next series, obviously, our next series we'll be covering here, of course, is going to be Sunday. We're going to be doing our National Park series. But this one's going to be a bit different from some of the other national parks we're covering here today. That's because we're going to be covering Hot Springs National Park in Arkansas. A bit different from your average national park. And this area actually is rich with history. But just a little bit of background for the national park. This area was protected before the concept of even a national park even existed. It was created as an act in 1832, nearly 40 years before Yellowstone even came to be. Yeah, a protected area 40 years before Yellowstone has ever existed. But this area was a huge spa town and area, especially during the 19th and early 20th century. It was a hugely popular area for tourism. But it's a very unique national park. And I can't wait to cover that to you because it's definitely one of our nation's more unique parks. Oh, I see you, Sir Dev. You're coming up there. So we definitely have some unique areas here. We're just above, to our right, by the way, is Nashville, Tennessee. This is, of course, around this is the Nashville area, the capital, most populous city in Tennessee. It's grown tremendously over the last 10 years or so. The past 20 years, it's grown immensely since then. So. So, that is what we're going to do today. So, I want to see how much more is top of Descent, of course, TOD. Which is the button for map settings? This one's. So we're going to go ahead and continue on forward, of course. But oh, nice! You got to expect your Comanche's engine. My thoughts were confirmed. 2 failing fuel pumps. Oh, that's not good. Yeah, the E2A Comanche has live state failures and stuff, so I'm not surprised. So, pretty big stuff, of course. So, of course, from a lot of people seeing trending today for the college football playoff, I'm obviously voting for Indiana. I hope Indiana wins because I want to see Indiana be fun enough to see Indiana win a championship. Though I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon got a chance to win the national title soon. Well, the electric boost pump has been on its way out for a while. Yeah, you're going to have to put yourself a new one, of course. Shouldn't be that surprising. To get yourself a new one. So it wouldn't be that surprising. So be next one. Of course, we're just 189 nautical miles out from our final stop here from Fulton County. So I think we may not be waiting too much longer to get top of descent. Yeah, I hope Indiana wins. The Hoosiers, I mean, have been one of the worst programs in college football for decades. No, seriously. When we're going to talk about Indiana, I'll expose to you how rough Indiana's had it over the past 130 years, of course. Um, when we get to Indiana, trust me, it'll be 1150-ish. It's been a big year. It's been their first undefeated season ever. Their player have won the Heisman Trophy for the first time in history. And it's been an unbelievable turnaround of epic proportions. I haven't seen this quick of a turnaround in ever. So big deal, of course. 1150. That doesn't sound too bad for a plane like the Comanche for electrical parts. I don't think that sounds too bad, though I could be wrong. So once we get over to our next waypoint, we'll talk about the Indiana Hoosiers for a bit. Indiana football, of course. IU football. So for the January 28th game, I'll probably work on it when we get done with the stream. There's definitely going to be some interesting things going on this week that week. But from what I looked in the schedule, and after doing some looking, I think most likely our game on the 28th of for the weekend of the 28th is probably going to be it's going to be a tough one, but I have a strong feeling that our game of the 28th, when we get back on the weekend, is probably going to be it could very well be USG versus Club Brugge in Belgium. The reason, though, is because these two are the top two teams in the Belgian league. Club Brugge and Royal Union St. Gilloise. Those two are the top two clubs in Belgium, of course, though that could change. But I think those are the top two in Belgium, so I think that could very well likely be our next one. Should be a really interesting game, and Belgian league kind of gets overlooked, but Belgium would be pretty cool. The other one that I'm thinking about doing is Strasbourg and PSG. That could be the other game this week on that week. I'll have to wait and see, but those are probably the two ones I'm looking forward the weekend I get back. Because this is actually the last stream I'll be doing before I officially leave. Because I'll be heading out of town on that Thursday. Because we're gonna be heading out of town for that Thursday, of course, on January 15th. So this will be my last. So Sunday will be my last stream. So I'm gonna be heading out of town next week. So for a 11-day cruise. So this might just be one of our last streams. So sadly, no game day flights next week, of course. Yeah, they had a guy in the seniors who was a season pass for 6 years. First time I've seen us win like this. I know Indiana football fans have been through a lot of misery over the past decades, of course. Like, I'm happy for their fans. I'll be very excited to see them win. Like, Indiana football has historically been terrible. And speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Indiana football. So IU football represents Indiana University in Bloomington in the Big Ten Conference, along with Oregon. Of course, they're one of the founding members of the Big Ten Conference. But IU football has won the Big Ten championship 3 times during their span. Their first ever Big Ten title was back in 1945. Then they won it in 1967, though they did have to share the conference championship. And then finally, this past year, 2025, the Hoosiers appeared in 15 bowl games, including the 1968 and the 2026 Rose Bowl games. Of course, historically, in 2024, they made the college football playoff in 2024. And that was the first year of the 12-team playoff era, and Indiana made it to the playoff. And unbelievably, the next year, in 2025, they achieved their second ever undefeated regular season, the first since 1945, and their first regular season winning all regular season games. And of course, they made it back to the playoffs again. Indiana football, of course, they're now just 2 games away from their first national championship. 6 Indiana players have also been elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, and we'll talk about some of these guys a little bit later. However, despite Indiana's incredible success as a program and IU's incredible history and recent success, Indiana has not always been the most successful program. In fact, Indiana's all-time record is 526 wins, 719 losses, and 46 ties. They have a win percentage of 42%. Now, this would have been worse if Curt Szigeti wasn't the coach, because they would have been around 500-something wins with a lot more losses. Yes, Indiana's win percentage is the lowest of it. They actually have the most all-time losses until November 2020, the most all-time losses in Division I football. Yes, IU football has had the most losses, though Northwestern reclaimed this feat with a loss to USC. So Northwestern is now the losingest football program. In fact, the Hoosiers also hold the 5th worst all-time win percentage of 1,000 games played, the 2nd worst of all the Power Conference teams. But nowadays, it's completely changed thanks to Curt Szigeti, and he's completely altered it, of course. But yes, Indiana football was known for futility. It's crazy how things have changed over the past 2 years or so. And yeah, here's the conference championships. And yeah, Indiana's only won 3 conference titles. Their undefeated season in 1945 was the last year of World War II, by the way. It was their first ever Big Ten title. And this was a year after, during World War II, when people were in the U.S. military. The second one was 1967, though they did have to share the conference title along with, they were co-champions, and they had to share it with Minnesota and Purdue for that conference title, of course, though they did play in the Rose Bowl, but lost to USC 14-3. And then, of course, probably the greatest Indiana team of all time, 2025, they went 14-0, and they dominated the conference 9 in a conference play. Of course, Indiana has been in 15 bowl games, but Indiana has won only 3 of them. One was the first ever bowl win was the Holiday Bowl against BYU in 1979, led by Lee Corso, of all people. Yes, Lee Corso, the famous guy you know in college Gameday. He was once Indiana's coach. Their second win came from, they actually won 4 games. Then they had Bill Mowry taking home a Liberty Bowl win over South Carolina, 34-10. And he also led them to another Copper Bowl win in 1991, defeating Baylor. And then the most recent bowl win under Curt Szigeti, the Rose Bowl, absolutely drubbing Alabama 38-3. Yikes. And Alabama, mind you, historically has been the most successful college football program. And Indiana destroyed them. Indiana football. Things have changed so much. So the stadium they currently play is the Memorial Stadium here in Bloomington. Opened back in 1960, of course. It's the 13th largest stadium in the Big Ten. 53,000. So yes, it's actually the 5th smallest stadium in the Big Ten. Of course, this was the record attendance was 56,000 against Purdue in 1969. One interesting thing about Memorial Stadium is that in 2005, head coach Terry Hopener had an Indiana limestone boulder installed in the north end zone known as the Rock. And it's part of Indiana's tradition, of course. The stadium is now named Hep's Rock when he passed away during brain cancer in 2007. And it's now a motivation for the team. Of course, the Rock was relocated to the East Concourse before the 2024 season. They also have the proud man mast of the two guns of the USS Indiana also around the stadium grounds in the west. It was an old battleship that served during World War II in several major operations in the war. So, definitely a pretty interesting stadium, though. Not the greatest stadium, but I don't think it's the worst stadium in the Big Ten. But definitely a solid ground. I know. Hey, Larry, good to see you. Yes, it is wacky right now. Where do I even begin with this? I mean, imagine a timeline where Indiana and Vanderbilt are actually good. I mean, Indiana is now competing for a national championship. Vanderbilt football is actually good. Yes, I know they did lose to Iowa, of course, but Vanderbilt still had a great season, a 10-win season for Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia even almost won a Heisman, nearly contended for a Heisman Trophy. Of course, Miami's in the national championship game, and Lord, don't even get me started on the NIL transfer portal business. Where do I even begin with that? It is absolutely chaotic. I know. Vanderbilt fans are eating well too. I know we've been bowling a lot more years. Like, it's good to see Vanderbilt finally be good. It's been needing to happen for a long time. Yeah, the 21st century has been a very good one for Vanderbilt. James Franklin, Derek Mason, and now Clark Lee, of course. But yeah, some really good years as well. It's been pretty crazy. Indiana football. Carson Beck was a UGA cast-off, I know. He left Georgia, and, well, Miami's now in the national championship game. They could win their first title since their legendary 2001 team. So, big deal. For Miami football. Miami fans have been waiting for this for years, of course. They always won the national championship. Looks like they might finally get their chance. So, of course, Indiana has several rivalries, though if you ask most Hoosier fans, the big one is obviously their local rivalry with Purdue. Purdue is their biggest rivalry by far. And that's Purdue. They played for the old Oaken Bucket, one of the more unique trophies in the Big Ten. They've been playing around since 1891. The trophy was first awarded in 1925. Currently, Purdue has dominated the series historically, 77 to 44-6. However, in the last 2 years, Indiana put up a 2-game win streak over the Boilermakers. Of course, the reason Purdue has led this rivalry is historically the more successful of the two programs has been Purdue football. Purdue used to have been, for the longest time, been the second biggest successful college program in Indiana, of course, behind Notre Dame. Yes, people kind of forget in the old days Purdue used to be successful in football. Nowadays, it's completely flipped. Purdue has been nowhere near as successful as Indiana has been. Whereas Purdue has been, for the most part, sadly been irrelevant as a program, Indiana has reached unbelievable heights. It's crazy to think about how far things have changed. And it's a shame because Purdue has had some amazing quarterbacks that played for their program. I mean, Drew Brees, Bob Greasy, Lynn Dawson, all these legends have played for the program, even other quarterbacks like Kyle Orton. And a few others have been playing for the NFL. So they had a lot of historically important players, too. The next rivalry is, of course, Illinois. That's another pretty intense one. Of course, basketball is the bigger deal with Illinois and Indiana, but they're still pretty intense rivals, too. Again, Illinois has dominated the Hoosiers in the rivalry as well, 46-25-2. And then the last one, the other trophy game Indiana plays for is Michigan State. They play for the Old Brass Spittoon. Of course, Michigan State leads the all-time series 49-20-2. That being said, Indiana is on a 2-game win streak and has actually won the rivalry. They actually won 3 of the last 4 meetings between the two programs. So Indiana has actually done better against Michigan State in the last few years. But yeah, as you can tell, a lot of these losses, of course, it's been dominated by their opponents because Indiana football historically has never been great. Until now, of course. Now, in terms of their uniforms, whereas Oregon, which we covered earlier in the stream, has always been known for their wacky uniforms and all that, Indiana is much more traditional. You always see a red jersey with red or white pants throughout most of the history, and while there have been several design changes in the jersey pants, they mainly use the block I or interlocking IU logo. For away games, Indiana utilized white jerseys with white pants, though there have been exceptions in the past using red and white colors. While the Hoosiers don't have alternate uniforms, there have been times where uniforms were altered from the traditional crimson and cream design. During the Cam era of the 90s in 2001, the jerseys of Block I were changed to red, black, and white. Yes, IU wearing black. What are they, Louisville? Of course, then afterwards they changed back as well. And of course, Indians always use red and white color scheme in their helmets. So, yes, Indiana is a much more traditional uniforms and much more traditional stuff as well. Finally, our last slide for Indiana is, of course, historically been one of the worst teams in the Power 5. Indiana has had several notable players. Of course, when we talk about the greatest player Indiana's ever had, look at the picture. It's Fernando Mendoza. Come on, the dude won the Heisman at Indiana of all programs. He won a crap ton of awards during his time at the Hoosiers, obviously. I mean, this dude won a Maxwell, a Heisman Trophy, Maxwell, Walter Camp, Davey O'Brien Award, the Big Ten Most Valuable Player, and of course, the Heisman Trophy, the first one in Indiana history. The dude has set a standard for this program. And fun enough, he actually came from Cal, believe it or not. He originally was recruited to California. However, he then joined for the Hoosiers in 2024, and little did many Hoosier fans realize he had an unbelievable year in Indiana. But yeah, greatest in terms of college career, Mendoza has by far the greatest career. And if he could win a national championship this year, it would put him on a different pedestal compared to every other Hoosier player. He would be on a completely different pedestal. I'm serious. He's been unbelievable. Then of course, you also have one of the retired numbers of Indiana, Anthony Thompson, born from Terre Haute. And he was a star at Indiana. He was also the other Maxwell Award winner during his 1989 season. He was a 2-time Big Ten Most Valuable Player, and he was an unanimous All-American in 1989. He had an unbelievable year that year in his senior year, rushed for 1,700 yards and 24 touchdowns. In fact, he actually even came close to winning the Heisman Trophy back in 1989. Unfortunately for him, during that 1989 season, unfortunately, he didn't win the Heisman Trophy. Someone else won it that year. Let's see who won the Heisman in 1989. Because I know Thompson came very close to winning it. It was Andre Ware. Andre Ware won the Heisman Trophy. He just beat out Anthony Thompson by 70 votes. Andre Ware out of Houston. And I mean, to be kind of fair, that year, Andre Ware was an unbelievable quarterback during his time in Houston. He was part of that legendary air raid attack. He had that legendary one and shoot offense that Houston was so famous for. It was mainly during those Houston Cougar times with John Jenkins. But definitely Indiana's second greatest college player. Then of course you have Pete Pijos, and he's actually been the Indiana player who's had the greatest pro career, and he's the only Hoosier to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was an end and fullback. He was actually served in the U.S. military during World War II for the U.S. Army. And then after his military career ended, he played for the Hoosiers during their 1949 campaign, and then he had an amazing pro career. 6-time All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowl. He was a 2-time NFL champion with the Philadelphia Eagles, and even led the NFL in reception and receiving yards quite a few times. But he's definitely the greatest player in the pro career for Indiana football of the Hoosiers. Then you have George Taliaferro, one of Indiana's handful of College Football Hall of Fame players. He was a running back who played for Indiana during the 1950s, and he mainly played for the New York Yanks. Don't confuse him for the Yankees, of course, but they were actually the New York Yanks of the NFL, and then they played for the Dallas Texans, and then he had a career with quite a few other teams. But the fun thing about him is that he was actually the first African American drafted to the NFL. But he had a wide career with Indiana football. Then of course we have John Tavener, major center. He was a big part of Indiana football during the 1940s. Again, another star of Indiana during the 40s, of course. He never served in the military due to a concussion he served, but he was a major part of Indiana football and was an All-American. Then, of course, Tevin Coleman is one of the more notable Hoosiers. He has had a pretty successful pro career, mainly with the Falcons. Then we have Antoine Randall L. Fun guy about Antoine Randall L. Quite a fun story about him. He was actually once a quarterback at Indiana, of course. He was actually a quarterback. And he was actually quite a successful quarterback during his time in Indiana. But of course, he was actually then selected as a wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he had quite a successful career with the Steelers from 2002 to 2010. But Randall L. was a pretty successful receiver in the league. Then you have quarterback Trent Green, mainly played for the Rams, but then he had a career renaissance in Kansas City. And then James Harden. But those are the most notable Indiana Hoosiers, of course. As you can tell, Indiana has not had nearly the legendary players of Oregon did. Now, compared to the other major program that we covered, Oregon, it's clear Indiana hasn't had the same type of legendary talent. So we should descend here very shortly. So we're going to go ahead and descend. So hopefully we can descend here shortly. We're just about 73 nautical miles, so we should hopefully get a descent. So we should descend here very shortly. So we're going to go ahead and descend. We're going to descend down to 4,000 feet. We're going to go flight level change. And we're going to descend. So we're going to descend down to our waypoint. So we're going to finally descend down over to Fulton County. So we're finally making our descent. So we're going to make our way over to Fulton County Airport here. So a bit about Fulton County, of course. Fulton County is known as Charlie Brown Airport or Brown Field, named after the former politician at the time, Charles M. Brown. It's well known for it's a Class D airport and the nearest airport to Hartsfield-Jackson, and it handles much of the GA traffic that would have otherwise gone there. So this is a pretty busy GA airport here in Atlanta. So that's why we're going here today. So here we go, guys. We're finally descending. So we're finally going to descend here. So we should get here down pretty soon. So thank you guys for coming here today, this morning stream. So here we go. So we're going to go ahead and descend. Barrel off. So we're now back to the V path. We're now going back to So we're now going back to the V path, of course. So here we go. So here we go. We're about to make a descent here. So of course, a lot of cloud cover today in this part of Atlanta. But So I'll let you guys know what happened to the Rose Bowl ones. I'll guys let you know what happened to the game after. So I'll be letting you guys know when the after the game on the Peach Bowl. I'll let you guys know what happened on Sunday. Okay, I'll let you know what happened during that time. But this is an absolutely huge matchup because either we see Miami versus Indiana or Miami versus Oregon. This should be pretty fun. I hope it's Indiana Miami. I think that would be pretty fun. That being said, there's tons of appeal with the Hurricanes versus Oregon game. Flashing uniforms and flashing programs, of course, because Oregon's got flashy uniforms, while Miami has historically always been a flashy program in general. If you know anything about Miami football, historically, Miami Hurricanes, very historically, very flashy players, of course. Lots of some major scandals, of course, and some major controversies, but I mean, but Miami's always been that, so I think it would be pretty interesting, of course. But if you guys want to know a little bit about Miami football as we make our landing here, Miami's had 5 national championships. Two of them won by Derek. First one by Howard Schellenberger, who later became Louisville's coach. But Howard won a title. Jimmy Johnson won one in 1987. Dennis Erickson put 2 in 1989, 1991, and the most recent with Larry Coker. Miami also has several pretty big rivalries, most notably with the other 2 Florida programs, especially Florida State. Florida State is by far Miami's most bitter rivalry, since Miami and Florida State have had so many moments, especially in the 80s and 90s, as they have been huge rivals. So many moments, of course. Florida's another very bitter one. Miami and Florida have been pretty bitter. But they have several newer ones, including with Louisville, actually. The Cardinals and Hurricanes actually are now newer rivals. A bit of a newer side. But Louisville and Miami have actually been pretty good over the last few years. Louisville's won... Used to be Miami dominated, but then starting 2006, Louisville's won 5 of the last... Has won 5 of the last 8 matchups between Florida and Miami. It's now closing up a bit, including a very huge win against number 2 Miami earlier in the year. But the reason Louisville Miami are even rivals is because both of them have Howard Schellenberger as their coach, who is both Miami's coach and Louisville's coach from Miami 1979 to 1983. And Louisville from 1985 to 1994, and he was credited for rebuilding both their programs and leaning on the financial issues, which makes sense because if it wasn't for Howard, we wouldn't have the Miami Hurricanes of today, and God knows what happened with Louisville if Howard never showed up. Louisville would have never been anywhere near the ACC, at least. So we're just arriving to Atlanta, of course. And we've made it to Atlanta, of course. So we're right in DeKalb, actually. So we're just arrived in DeKalb, of course. Oh yeah, mustache goals. Yes, Schellenberger, of course, his famous mustache. Mustache goals. Oh yeah, but yeah, Schellenberger was such a successful coach. Though sadly, he would probably never be in the College Football Hall of Fame. Sadly, because unfortunately for him, his winning percentage was never high enough. But he was credited for rebuilding Miami to prominence, rebuild Louisville into what it is today, and of course he was also Florida Atlantic's coach and helped build their program up from the FCS level. But yeah, he's had a massive legacy in the sport. But yeah, huge legend though. But never. So huge guy. However, he's ineligible to be in the College Football Hall of Fame because his winning percentage is under 600. But that's a terrible thing to put because sometimes because he's transformed entire programs. So, in fact, he's the only coach that has won a national championship that isn't in the College Football Hall of Fame, which makes no sense. Stupid thing. So here it is, guys, downtown Atlanta to our left. So if you look left, we can see the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech. We can see Georgia Tech here to our left. So I'm going to go ahead and manually adjust the speed. So yeah, there it is, guys. There it goes, Atlanta. So here we go, guys. We're in the glide path. So we're about to make our landing here in Fulton County. So here we go, guys. A beautiful landing in Fulton County Airport. Like I said, it's nice to fly this Vision Jet. Never really got the chance to fly it too much previously, but I think it's fine to fly here today. So we'll officially be back here on Sunday, of course, so. Here we go. What's up, and we're down. Nice. Our landing rate, 36 feet per minute. That's very smooth landing. Ah, that's great. We're gonna go ahead and get this thing parked. Look at that, negative 36 feet per minute. I mean, I could stall. Maybe I should stall flow. Maybe I need to get that back. Okay, and we're going to get parked over here. There we go. So that's it, everyone. Welcome to Fulton County Airport, everyone. I hope you're all having a great day. So we're here in. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend and take your time. We're going to be back on Sunday in Arkansas. We're going to be making our way into Hot Springs National Park. So take care, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. And see you all again soon. Take care, everyone, and have a great start of your weekend. Goodbye, everyone.